Hi, I'm Lorne Epstein, the host of The Lorne Epstein Show, where we talk about the workplace. And you're listening to us on 96.7 FM, Arlington, Virginia. Thanks for joining us again. Today we have a very, very special show on what we are doing to bridge the skills gap. And I've got some great guests with me. I'd like to introduce them. The first one is Mahan. Do I have that right, Mahan?
Mahan, yes.
Mahan. And his last name is Tavakoli. Mahan Tavakoli, and he is the founding executive director of Genesys Works. Now, we had the founder and CEO on a most recent show, and Mahan also works at Genesys Works. He works here in the DC office. Mahan is a highly accomplished executive with multifaceted background in global operations management, sales, and professional services, and now he's helping high school students get their education, which is fascinating. I want to hear that story. During his career with Dale Carnegie, Mahan turned around underperforming operations on 5 continents. Now he's focused on bringing success to children's education, which I think is really awesome. I say children, but really high school students. And also with us today is James Williams. James, we just met recently, but he's the Associate Director of Programs at Year Up, and everyone who listens to the show knows that Year Up is a sponsor of our show. So yay, Year Up. Also, we want to give a shout out to our other new sponsor, my dentist, Dr. Bruce Hanley. How about that, right? So James is here in Arlington, Virginia. He explored his passion for youth advocacy and uplifting marginalized communities during his college experience. Since joining Year Up in 2015, he has worked with the National Capital Region to close the opportunity divide. Welcome to the show, James.
Thank you.
So first I want to kind of talk about the big problem, the big hairy problem that we're all looking at, we're all interested in solving. And you know what's funny, just kind of a sidebar, when I do these shows where we're really kind of expressing a point of view, people have asked me, well, why don't you have people who are kind of opposing this as like some other shows do? And I don't take that route. I believe, on the right side of history with good ideas and just support those. So today, I mean, you guys are clearly doing the same work. But I think what's missing in our dialogue is what are the right things to do. So really, this is about you guys, what you're up to with your organizations, and the right and correct actions that we should be taking as a society to make it a working society for everyone. So, I see the problem, and I'd like you to chime in on this, as really there's several things that are in the way. One, high school students, people who are 18 to 24 and older, don't have the right skills. They just do not have the right skills. There's 5 or 6 million jobs, 5 or 6 million people that aren't working, and people don't have the right skills. But that's not the only problem. And I didn't really know this until I kind of got deeper into learning, from Guy at Year Up, that it's also the cultural barriers, that there's this veil between these cultures where people live and the outside world. They don't know how to get out of that. They don't have the resources. Even if you say, well, here's this technology that you can learn how to do, they don't know how to break out into the corporate America or even find these things. And then I'm learning more. We just, we're either doing or did a show with a woman from Tennessee, and other barriers are in the way, like health concerns. If the family is not healthy, it's going to be really hard for the kid to do something. So it's a multifaceted problem, and I'd like to hear first, James, what do you see the problem is that's going on right now in our society?
Absolutely. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there with around the cultural barriers in that sense of you only know what you know. Okay. And if you grow up in a particular environment where you only see individuals who are working in fast food positions and things of that nature, having to scrap and scram for every dollar to get the opportunity to move ahead, then that's your lens and your purview of what success is going to look like. If you don't have, founders of organizations walking around in your neighborhood or entrepreneurs in your neighborhood and things of that nature, then there's a lack of exposure. So clearly where we both come in is providing that access to opportunity, okay, and that lens of what opportunity looks like. And I also think that, we just overlook these communities because it's easier to pick a student who comes from Harvard or Yale or any other 4-year institution because there's we've kind of been inundated with they're going to be able to do the skills because they have the education. In many instances, we know that that's not the case,
Right.
Where it's the hands-on training
Right.
That's going to help you to move forward, because you can go to university and attain your master's degree, which, tells me that you understand a lot of theory. But where have you applied any of that in a practical manner?
Yeah, I want to just sidebar. When I was in college, there were two of my fellow students, my cohort, who did not know how to use SAS, which is this computational program, and they paid me $50 each to do their homework. Now I'm copping to it. I don't know if I committed a crime, but they didn't even have the drive to figure out how to learn this, and I'm not a smart student by any stretch of the imagination. And I reflected on that. It's like, wow, like they went to college and they kind of didn't learn that. And I see a lot of kids who go to college who don't really know how to learn or know. You're right. There's a huge disconnect between college and what we really need. Mahan, what do you see as the problem?
Yeah, and Lorne, I find that we try to simplify all issues to the one problem that needs to be addressed. And as you said, there are lots of different facets to this. And one of the critical factors is there's an aspirations gap. There was a wonderful article this past Take Your Kids to Work Day in Brookings, that it shouldn't be Take Your Kids to Work Day, because the people who are reading Brookings are not the ones whose kids need to be exposed to the environment where their aspirations would be a lot higher.
Right.
So there's a lack of aspiration because people haven't seen the environments, haven't had the opportunity to interact and visualize themselves in those environments. And that has as big of an impact on being able to put the hard work in to get to those levels as anything else.
Right. So I think a lot of the listeners, I mean, thankfully, I think we have highly educated listeners, but there's only like 3 listeners. So it's kind of a give and take.
3.
Yeah, we love those 3. I mean, they are awesome. They're constantly listening to the show. So, what do we tell people who are really completely outside of us? And I think culturally in America, at least, what I perceive from the media and what I perceive from some of my friends is that they think that folks either are lazy or they don't want to, or they just want to kind of take the easy road. And what we've been hearing and learning is that is absolutely not the case. What have you found in your students?
I think one of the things we see in our students is it's something that's intangible in that essence of grit. When that stick-to-itiveness because coming from the challenging environments and having again to scrap and scrounge, you develop this innate to just continue to go and push through whatever those challenges are, as we've seen with some of our young adults who are parents or in the transitions of going from homelessness, to be able to come to the program every day because knowing what the opportunity that lays ahead for them.
So would you say that there's a greater level of resilience in the population that you serve?
Absolutely.
That's interesting because that's what Raphael talked about in resilience. We talked about resilience in the show with him. Say more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Are working them towards this idea of being epic, and what it means to be empowered, professional, in demand, and career ready. But again, grit being the underlying piece to all of that. And again, what that means to when you wake up one morning, you're not going to make it to program on time, but you know that you still need to show up, and knowing what that looks like when you're not going to make it on time. Okay. But again, knowing that mouth that needs to be fed in order to help you to push through and get to where you need to be. It's a remarkable thing, and it helps me to keep going every morning when I feel that I'm having a bad day, and the barriers in which they're overcoming every day to just make it there. Right.
So it's not easy for them. They don't have the safety net of like, oh, I've got it. I can't not take this opportunity.
Absolutely.
So, and what do you notice, Mahan?
And Lorne, I find I was having this conversation with my wife last night that we live in almost 2 parallel universes, in that the opportunities and the challenges that my kids get to interact with and see on a daily basis is very different than the young professionals we're dealing with. And a lot of people in the community are not aware of those other people in the community. So just this summer, we had a couple of young professionals that had to work overnight, then go home, take a shower, come to our training, in order to qualify for the internships. Then in the afternoons, spend a couple of hours and go back to work. Now, most of the people that we interact with on a daily basis don't know anyone like that. Therefore, we don't understand some of the issues, some of the barriers that they have to deal with. One of these young professionals, his little sister had gotten sick, and obviously they have a lot of issues with paying for that little sister. So while going through high school, he had 2 part-time jobs. So these are very resilient people. But in many instances, all we see is through our lens of what we have become familiar with. Therefore, taking an opportunity to become familiar with some of these other life stories of people who live right here in our own community is a great way of understanding how much resilience they have, how much determination they have. And in most instances, if we were put in their places, we wouldn't be able to keep up.
Yeah. I think there's a meme that I really like to break up, which is that people who are getting support from the government are somehow lazy or, they aren't working hard enough for it. And I think that's completely incorrect. I know in our county here in Arlington that we have a lot of kids who are getting paid lunch by the federal government and otherwise they wouldn't eat. It isn't like they're taking that money and saving it to buy a BMW. That is not the case. Absolutely not the case. If it was the case, then they would have other opportunities to move along in their lives, and they're not. They're not because of, the things that what you're providing aren't available to everybody, which is that all those components to solve all these different problems.
And it is. And in many instances, it is access to those opportunities. A couple of days ago, we had lunch with a powerful lobbyist in D.C., and he was saying that at any point I can call someone who can call someone to get my kids an internship or a job. And we all know that's a big part of how the business community works.
Yeah.
But these are individuals that don't have someone who has someone who can get them a job. Therefore, in most instances, it's access to opportunities. Mm-hmm. It's having the vision and aspiration of what they can become, but then being given a chance to work hard.
Mm-hmm. So in part, seeing this problem requires a paradigm shift in how we look at our fellow citizens.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
So tell me a little bit about your organizations now. I don't know when we're airing this show relative to the show we just did with Genesys Works, but tell me about Europe. I mean, Guy, who is the head of the national capital, the DC office, was here last year. And I want our listeners to kind of get a sense of what is it that Europe is doing right now.
Absolutely. So we're a national nonprofit that works with 18 to 24-year-olds on their professional and career development. And particularly how we do that is providing our young adults with the professional skill training in addition to the hard skill training that they need to be competitive in the job market. We've identified that there is the skill gap, and we're meeting that need of employers for quality entry-level talent. So our young adults come to us for 6 months. It's 47 weeks, the duration of the program. The first 21 weeks is our learning and development phase, where they're, again, learning those professional soft skills and hard skills in tracks around cybersecurity, quality assurance, help desk.
And are these skills
the
skills that you're teaching them, are they skills that an employer is going to want to hire?
Absolutely.
So you match that up.
Definitely.
You don't
absolutely.
teach things that are kind of irrelevant.
Right, absolutely. We're not teaching basket weaving or anything of that nature to try to find them careers, but definitely market driven. So knowing what career opportunities are in the DMV area here and all across the country in our different markets as well. So for instance, here, as I made mention of, cybersecurity is really big being here with the government here. But in our New York offices, we offer anti-money laundering. Because it makes sense for that market there. Our young adults are paid an educational stipend while they're in the program to help them with some of those challenges. But in addition to helping them understand the concept of just coming to work, and if you're here, you're paid. If you're not, you don't get paid.
So let me just recap that. Mm-hmm. So for the first 6 months, they're going to your facility and getting education from a trainer, a teacher.
Correct.
For 6 months, they're getting some stipend to cover some of their expenses. And you are really developing them, because when I've gone to the offices, and if you've never gone to a Europe office, just go. I went last Tuesday. I was there at 7:30 in the morning. There was maybe a dozen kids around. They were all professionally dressed. The guys were in ties. Every single one said good morning to me. Every single one acknowledged me in a professional, polite way. And I have to say that's nice. That's really nice. And that's what you teach them. So a lot of the folks that work at Europe are also kind of guiding and mentoring and coaching in how to be.
Absolutely. And we also have a site in Woodbridge, Virginia, where we partner with Northern Virginia Community College there. So exact same program, just the difference being is that our students there are earning their associate's degrees in either cybersecurity or IT simultaneously while being in Europe.
So after they have their 6 months, then they go and get a job. You place them.
Correct, on internships.
With partner companies.
Correct, absolutely.
Who pay a fee.
Yes, to year up.
Right.
Yep,
so they pay a fee, and then they get these students to work for them for 6 months. And then what happens?
And then after that, when all the stars align, then our young adults are converted and generally hired at those partners. So with our last class, 47% of those students were hired at their internship partner. The average salary for those young adults was $47,000.
That's amazing.
For that class.
So we're going to talk more about Year Up, but I wanted to just kind of give people a sense who are listening. What is it that Year Up does? And you're a nonprofit.
Yes.
So people can donate to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, Mahan, tell me a little bit about Genesys. I know that you have kind of 4 steps. You've got the 8 weeks of training. Give us a little bit of background on what Genesys does.
Yeah, Genesys Works is also a nonprofit, and we work with young adults in underserved communities, targeting them while they are still in high school. So we recruit high school juniors and train them.
So at 16?
Yeah, they're
16 to 18?
16, 17 years old. And we train them this summer between their junior and senior years in professional skills. Same types of things, how do you greet people, how you interact with people, how you work in a team environment, and in IT skills, similar to what a A+ certification or Cisco Essentials certification would be. So the training by itself has a significant impact on them. But part of the goal is then to place them in paid internships their senior year in high school. So they end up going to high school every morning, and then they go to their paid internships afternoons, working about 20 hours a week during the school year. And obviously, that continues developing some of their skill level because we work with their supervisors to give them performance reviews, give them raises based on their performance in the work environment, and also work with them pretty actively on college application and financial aid. We're
gonna take a quick break, but we're gonna come back. I want to hear more about that. We'll be back in just a minute. I'm your host, Lorne Epstein. You're listening to the Lorne Epstein Show here on 96.7 FM, Arlington, Virginia. We'll be back in just a second. Hi, my name's Lorne Epstein, and every week at 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock on Mondays, I talk about jobs and careers and the workplace. We've done shows on pot in the workplace, the salary secrecy laws, and how to write a resume. I'm inviting you to come on our show. If you're interested or have show ideas, you can give me a call at 240-876-0276 or email me at lorne@electriccow.com. Or you can go to our webpage at lorneepstein.com or our Facebook page, which is also Lorne Epstein, and our Mixcloud account is, and you guessed it, Lorne Epstein at mixcloud.com. Hope to see you here on the show soon. Welcome back to the Lorne Epstein Show. I'm your host, Lorne Epstein, and today you're listening to 96.7 FM. Today we're talking to Mahan Tavakoli and James Williams. We're talking about bridging the skills gap, and not just that, but all the problems around that. Mahan, you were telling us about the work at Genesys. Just please continue.
Yeah, so while they're going through the internship, we work with them on college access, financial aid, which can be an absolute maze, especially for these young adults, most of them first-generation college. So people who haven't seen others and haven't had their parents or family members access college. We work with them on that. And eventually, after they transition, vast majority transition onto college, and we work with them while they're in college, both for their persistence in attaining their education and then in their success into professional environments afterwards.
So you're with them through their entire 2 or 4 years of college?
Yes. We support our alumni. The core part of the program is while they're going through high school.
Yeah.
And impacting their aspirations and their skill level. But we do maintain a relationship with them while they go through college, because a lot of first-generation college students have a very tough time, especially that first year. And their drop-off rate is pretty high. So we do a lot of hand-holding with them.
Now, Mahan, you had a professional career before this. What did you do before, and what had you transition into doing this work?
Yeah, I had a long career at Dale Carnegie Training, both here locally, running the operation, and eventually international operations. A couple of different things. First of all, in this region, from mid-90s, we've been talking about the skills gap and the opportunity gap. And I find there's a lot of studies. Every other month, someone puts out a study. Very little action around it. So AOL had pulled together a conference with Steve Case when AOL was really big, talking about the skills gap. We need to do something for this region. And now they've been through Board of Trade and others, newer studies, initiatives, and same thing, George Mason University. But a lot of companies want the talent, but aren't necessarily focused on talent development and aren't focused on bridging the gap. So I find a lot of passion in that. And also, having seen a lot of the international environments, I saw needs in other countries, and I wanted to have an impact and realized that having an impact closer to home is a lot more significant. To be honest with you, Lorne, I was totally unaware of the disconnect even in our community. I grew up in Montgomery County, didn't know that 30+% of Montgomery County public school students are free reduced lunch. Fairfax County, 30+% of Fairfax County public school students are free and reduced lunch. And these are all people that live in our community, but we might not be interacting with on a daily basis with.
Mm. And James, how did you make that transition? You were really passionate, I guess, at some point.
Absolutely. So, during my time at George Mason University, got introduced to a social innovation program where I got, to dive into nonprofit and really developing my passions, and had the opportunity to work for a smaller organization within Fairfax County, actually working in public housing communities, serving families up to 200 residents. And to your point, just here in Fairfax County, public housing communities that you wouldn't even recognize that are public housing communities. And I think that's a great thing in terms of twofold. And there's not necessarily a separation of us and them. Poor people live here, and everyone else lives here. But to your point, some of those things are hidden sometimes in the county, and we like to think of our general per capita in this area that people aren't living below that poverty line when actually many of them are.
Right.
And then from there, identifying the particular population I want to work with, being the young adults, definitely enjoy the kids.
But why did that make a difference for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's only so many times you can give out snacks in an afternoon.
Yeah.
but particularly just knowing.
Not in my house.
But particularly just recognizing the individuals that were very important in my journey going through college, and the missteps in which I took, and how there was someone there to kind of help with redirecting, and knowing again, how that led me to where I am. So it's only right that I provide that opportunity for other young adults.
So you feel a calling to give back,
absolutely.
To give.
Absolutely.
And is it the same for you, Mahan?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I've been very fortunate in my life, and therefore I realize some of the advantages that I have had, and want to offer those opportunities to other people in the community.
So I want to continue painting this picture for the listener. How did we get here? Because this isn't an old problem, right? I mean, my dad taught in vocational high school. People have been working for as long as there have been people. What happened?
Well, technology is also having an impact on the gap, because when the economy wasn't as knowledge-based, it was a lot easier for people just by sheer hard work to engage with the economy at any point. But because of advancement of technology, that gap is harder for people to fill without additional training, without additional development. And I think as we go into the new economy with technology being a part of every aspect of our lives, that's going to happen more and more. Everyone talks about young adults being digital natives. The population we deal with, they're not digital natives. They're not the ones that have the iPads and computers back at home. Most of them have cell phones. That's about it.
Right. Except here in Arlington, all the kids get iPads.
And that's a great initiative,
right,
to expose everyone to some of the technology that they would be needing to work with, to whether they want to go on to college or whether they want to be effective in a workplace environment. So I think technology is having even more of an impact, and therefore requires us to focus more on skill development and training and retraining to be able to give the opportunity to as many people in our community as possible.
Absolutely. I think when we think about our young adults, being mindful of something as simple as we take advantage of internet access and what that looks like for them in their home. So ensuring that the site is open for hours and laptops are available for them to do those things. And if they need to borrow a laptop from the site to ensure that they are completing assignments and continuing to brush up on their technical skills.
And what else do you think got us here? I mean, I think it's important to discuss only because, we talk about policy, and policy has an impact: federal policy, state policy, local policy. It'd be good to know where did we go wrong? When did we stop kind of focusing on this, and why?
I think, at least through my experience, it's that there's been a conversation around it past 20 plus years. There's been very little action, and therefore that gap continues to widen. So it's not as if there were good old days where there wasn't a gap. It's a gap has been there, and now there's even more of a need to act on it, again, because of the technology.
Yeah, definitely. I would absolutely agree. And again, coming in to recognize how do we bridge that gap and meeting the needs of our employers. Okay, so being sure that we're continually be market driven in what we're trying to do.
Yeah. I mean, I graduated college in the 80s, and one of the things I noticed was I was one of the few of my cohort that got a job in the field they wanted to get a job in. And I think this has kind of been a problem where you go to school, you go to college, you get a degree, and there's only a few degrees that really dictate what you're going to do: engineering, nursing. But most degrees are fairly generic. And then you go out and you get a job in something that's not necessarily what you wanted to do. And there was I know in corporate America there was an appetite for students. But like you were saying, I think that technology and other things have kind of created much more of a schism, right? That employers really don't need an English major. Maybe you know how to read and write English, but they need you to be a social media expert, and you need to know the actual tools that go with this job. Because, like you're saying, technology is more involved in the work we do. I mean, when I started working, I worked for a high-tech company. We had computers, but I think I was using basic. I actually programmed, but I was using basic computer stuff. Right, it wasn't the internet. It wasn't particularly heavy-duty Excel. And now that general business skills, you've got to be really strong at Excel. And if you don't know that, there's a lot of things that aren't available to you.
Yeah, and also I know Europe and James work on this too, Lorne, is that in addition to the hard skills, there's an ability to engage with the business community and people in businesses in order to be able to access those opportunities. So you're an expert on all kinds of bias and whether people's resumes have one name versus another, who gets an opportunity. But beyond that, there's also a point people walk in the door, even if they come in with identical technical skills and capabilities, how they can fit in an environment, how they can culturally connect with people in that environment plays a significant role. And therefore, some of the young adults we work with that have grown up in environments where they haven't been exposed to these things, they walk in and they feel out of place. They behave out of place. And therefore, even if they meet all the technical criteria, the interviewers say, the person just doesn't fit in, right? Doesn't fit in because we want part of what organizations look for is a cultural fit to the organization. Now, how you define that can be very broad. Therefore, yes, the technical skills and the education is critical. However, part of what we find is that ability to engage on a cultural level and on a social level often is as important as anything else.
Absolutely. The importance of the soft skills, and that's what separates our young adults in any of these environments, so that the point you made earlier, just the ability to acknowledge you and coming in the door with that friendly smile and that handshake and being able to look someone in the eye, what that does. Because in many instances, once you've made it to the interview, you're qualified for the position. It's just a matter if we like you or not at that point.
So let me ask you a question. I hate jumping to the solution, but I feel like I kind of want to talk about that a little bit. And I guess I was kind of thinking, I really want to know what the solution is. But then what came to me is like, well, how do you do what it is that you do, right? So, Mahan, you focus on 16 to 20-year-olds?
I'm 16 to 17, 18 at most. So they are all the students we recruit are juniors in high school. and all of them are seniors in high school as they're doing their internships.
And what
which is why
qualifications-
we partner very well with
Absolutely.
Year Up.
And you guys do partner.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, that's great. We'll want to hear more about that. But then what happens? You get Mary, who's 17 years old. What qualifies her to work with you? And then what happens?
So we work very closely with the school system to recruit students that fit our target profile,
Which is?
free and reduced lunch, socioeconomic background, and also primarily first-generation college. So those who would be the first in their family to go on to college. And they have to have some interest in business and technology. They don't need to have any background training in it, but at least some interest, because our internships are in technology, and we want them to aspire to be the technologists, if at all possible. So that's why we then end up training them in the summertime, and a big part of the program is their internships. So we have clients such as Accenture, Intelsat, the satellite company, Kirkland & Ellis law firm, where our young professionals work in their IT teams supporting IT help desk support for the entire year of their senior year. So they can see the professional environment, they can aspire to be back to that professional environment, they can get some of the skills and capabilities and some of the coaching and guidance, both from our program coordinators and the supervisors. And in many instances, also they continue on in part-time jobs in those same companies while going to college.
And what do you think their biggest aha moments are, their biggest learnings from having that year internship?
You know, almost to the person, that first day has been most impactful, where they've told me when they've walked in and they've been given a card that makes a lock go from red to green, gives them access, and they go in somewhere and see their name card on a cubicle and have their own computer. That is by far most significant. So I
what do they say?
You know, it's a year long. One of our young adults a couple of days ago was saying he asked his supervisor to pinch him, and the supervisor actually pinched him because they could never envision themselves in that environment. That is a status held for other people, and that is what they see in the movies. That's not what their parents or family members do. They've never been there. They've never seen it. So in many instances, they feel like I've now attained it, so I need to work hard to hold on to this.
Yeah, that's interesting, because we were talking about having grit and resilience, and it seems like this population has a lot of that, which is something that employers really want. I mean, more than anything else, I can teach you how to do a thing, but I can't teach you how to be the kind of person I'd like. So that's a great narrative. James, tell me more about what Year Up does. How does it work, and who qualifies, and then what are some of the experiences students have?
Absolutely. So again, the 18 to 24-year-olds, they have to have their high school diploma or GED to be a part of the Year Up program. In addition to that, we are looking at students who are a part of the Opportunity Divide, so low to moderate income students as well. They go through an admissions process in which we, interview students. They don't necessarily have to have interest in technology, but just, again, that willingness and eagerness to learn. And once they receive all the skills and training, and then they're on that internship experience, again, the goal is that those young adults will, be hired at that internship partner. We look at roughly about 85% of the students that, matriculate through the Year Up program then go on to further their employment or continuing their education. Students also receive up to 30 college credits while they're a part of the Year Up program, in which they can then transfer to move on to somewhere else.
That's like a year.
Absolutely.
So they go in as a sophomore.
Definitely. Absolutely. So again, helping them to move forward to the next step. And also remembering that it's an opportunity for a hand up, not a handout. So many of our young adults that have now moved through the program and are in management type positions are able to now bring in some of our new alumni as employers. Okay, so we can continue to create this cycle of breaking the opportunity divide for them.
Something that you have on your website, which is a quote, "We're wasting talent when we can't afford to waste anyone." And I thought, well, that's, if that doesn't really grab you, then you're not part of the human race.
Absolutely.
And Lorne, it's funny. I was in a conference in D.C. a couple of weeks ago, and they were talking about the need to recruit talent into the region. And I'm wholeheartedly supportive of recruiting talent into the region, because the conversation was about Amazon, bringing Amazon to the region, or wherever, whether Baltimore or D.C., and the fact that we have a talent drain and need to recruit talent. Wholeheartedly supportive of that. But we also do have a lot of young people in our region right now that would be able to fill those positions if we give them the opportunities. We don't necessarily need to recruit talent. Let's spend a little bit of our effort and focus and investment on developing these people who are in the region, giving them the opportunities. They are not looking for handouts. These are hardworking people, but giving them the opportunities to develop and fill those positions that are that we need the most.
It's interesting you say that. I've been in talent acquisition for over 20 years, and a lot of the listeners know what I've been doing. And I've always had this problem of, well, we can't find people, let's make them. And most companies aren't set up to make them anymore. There used to be, and some companies maybe still do, but we need that. We need to be able to make the people that we need to hire for these jobs, or our economy is not going to grow. I think it's the single most, there's a report that was commissioned by Genesys, where every dollar that is spent on sending students to Genesys, there's a $13 and change return, which is phenomenal. I mean, who would not make that kind of investment in our economy? But I wanted to ask, James, so what are some of the big aha moments that your students have during their journey?
I think one of the biggest things, and we hear from our young adults, is a big part of what we do is the coaching process. So each Europe staff member is a coach for our young adults, and that's a coaching around their professional, personal development, and then just many times someone to talk to, and that ability to be affirmed and what that means for them to understand that I can do something. And when that clicks for them, then it's a matter of us just getting out of the way, because they're a train that's running through, awesome. moving towards their future. So I think that's one of the biggest things, just that affirming of our young adults for them to recognize their true potential.
And that's a lot of the stuff that you give them. And I've seen your program is, these folks who help are social workers, but they really, really care about people. And that is the thing that they haven't gotten up to that point, because they've been tracked out of I hate to say the caring culture, but they've been tracked out of getting that kind of emotional support, which Absolutely. We all need. I mean, you can't be beaten down and expect to be successful. That's just not how it works. Yeah. I mean, a lot of the kids now are successful in my neighborhood here in Arlington. I mean, they have, usually two parents, and if they're not, the parents are. It's funny because now in the divorce community, parents get along. They're not like when I was a kid and my parents were divorced. It is so much better for them. They have so many opportunities. On my block, we have economists and lawyers and people with PhDs and on and on and on. They're already being born into these neighborhoods that are, you can't fail. I mean, it really takes a lot to not be on the right track. But a lot of these kids who don't have that, it is not helpful to us. And to look down and say, well, I've got it because I worked here, that is not the case. Because whoever is listening, started way along than where these guys are starting and these gals are starting. And that's the thing that I think we need to remind ourselves of in this journey. And you said it's not a hand out, it's a hand up, right? Which is what you're both doing.
And we find the same thing in that in supporting our young adults, in many instances, it's also engaging with their family or guardians. Because in their minds, they say, why would I even want my child to go on to college? Now, with many of the people we interact with, we say, well, obviously, going on to college will increase your chances of getting a job or a compensation, so on and so forth. But there's a lot of intervention that comes in in interacting with their family members or guardians to help them understand the value of greater education, the value of these opportunities, rather than going on straight out of high school to what ends up being a minimum wage job from there on out. So there's a lot of effort and intervention on whether it's Europe's program or Genesys Works that engages the entire family and the entire community to impact the lives of these young adults.
Absolutely, truly changing generational outlooks, for some families and breaking that cycle of poverty.
And speaking from the corporate perspective, there's a lot of value proposition to what you're saying for the business. Aside from having the people, this really expands my diversity population, and that is a huge issue, particularly if you're a federal contractor. You have to have that diversity. You could lose your contracts if you don't have that diversity. Also, people love to mentor. They love to mentor, and you're providing them with that opportunity, which binds them closer to the company, but also to their fellow employees. When they mentor someone for a year, and then 3 years after that, that person is like developed, that's that creates that sticky glue that people feel connected to the organization. And how are we going to build pipelines, right? I mean, a lot of the folks come to me around recruiting, and it's like, well, how do I find people? You got to build a pipeline. The whole notion, the Bureau of Labor Statistics said 18 months ago, 2015, that there are now more jobs than there are people. There are now more jobs than there are people. So, if you're going to start a business, you're going to have a company that's going to grow, you've got to figure out how you're going to build your talent pipeline, or forget about it. Google, Facebook, these companies, they have stopped recruiting in this country because they know all the people. They know all the people. So what you're providing isn't just about, hey, helping these people. It's about growing our economy. You want to have a growing economy? I know this current administration wants to hit 2 or 3% growth. The only way we're going to have that is take those 5 or 6 million people who are unemployed and all the folks who are coming out of high school and making sure that they are properly trained for the jobs that we have. There's a moral imperative and there is a business imperative to make this happen.
And Lorne, to that point, even for the individual companies, because sometimes we talk about these general impacts on the economy, and the companies see that as a responsibility of the company next door to them. But a lot of organizations are talking about the need to engage millennials and the fact that millennials want meaning in their job and in their work. Sure, once a year you can go paint a school building and feel good about it.
Sure.
However, this is an opportunity for those millennials to interact with people that are different than, in many instances, people they've grown up with, to nurture, mentor, and feel engaged because they're giving back, they're contributing back to the community. So it significantly increases employee engagement in the company, in addition to everything that you mentioned, from tech talent development, onto the fact that there is a pipeline, diversity of thought, diversity of background in the teams. So there is a lot of benefits that the individual companies that engage with programs like Europe and Genesys Works get, in addition to contributing to the talent pool of the community.
Absolutely. I think an example is our young adults, we created a very robust feedback culture in many environments, as we know in corporate America, don't necessarily foster feedback. And from our students understanding that culture, bringing that into some of these corporate partners where now they've adopted feedback cultures based on what our students have presented to them, So again, that paradigm shift around the thinking in which way we're doing things in corporate America and how our young adults can help with that shift.
I'm really enjoying the conversation, and I think our listeners are learning a lot about what's out there. We are going to take a break in a minute, but I wanted to kind of start talking about the solution, right? So the future of your programs hinges on what, and how do we get there? So let's start that conversation when we come back from our break. Hi, I'm Lorne Epstein. Every week I talk about jobs and careers on 96.7 FM, Arlington, Virginia, at 10 a.m. Mondays. Welcome back to the Lorne Epstein Show. I'm your host, Lorne Epstein. Today we're talking about how to bridge the skills gap, the diversity gap, the gap that we experience now in the workplace. With me, I have Mahan Tavakoli and James Williams. Mahan is with Genesys Works, and James is with Year Up. So let's talk about the future, right? If you were, Mahan, I don't want to say the king, right? You could just kind of snap your fingers and the world would be, made in your vision. What would we do to get to where it is you want to go?
Sure. The three aspects to it would be funding, internships or opportunities, and school systems. So on the funding side, whether it's Year Up or Genesys Works, we're nonprofits, and therefore it requires funding, staffing to engage these young adults and support them. That's one aspect of it. But more importantly, a lot of companies talk about this, but they need to engage in providing these opportunities to these young adults. So for our instance, and I know it's the same case for Year Up, giving these internship opportunities and not doing it as a token. So not saying, okay, we're willing to bring one person or two people on board. If you have 500 people, if you have 1,000 people, giving the opportunity to 20, 30, 40, 50. So opportunities and internships would be second. And then the third one would be our schooling is not necessarily meant to allow opportunities for young adults that need exposure to the work environment to change their aspirations. So the number of hours that kids need to spend in school, the Virginia State Legislature is actually discussing of whether they need to change that and reduce it to allow for more opportunities like Genesys Works. So these kids don't necessarily need to just go to class and just take high school classes, and they can have some work experiences, both to change their aspirations if they want to go on to college, and in some instances for middle skills jobs that are going unfilled and taking those opportunities.
So what you would change legislation that would what?
That would reduce the number of hours
from
that
what to what?
Kids need to be
what is it
in
now?
school. I don't know the exact hours for it, but in essence,
make room.
Absolutely. So at this point, there is very little wiggle room, and the only kids that have the opportunity to do additional programs are the ones that came into high school knowing exactly what they wanted to do. Therefore, their parents had everything lined up.
Do schools need to become more vocational? I say vocational because it's an old term. I've heard technology. But do they need to be more oriented towards the jobs that are currently available?
They need to provide the opportunity for that.
Yeah.
There will be some kids that will do really well in middle skill type positions and jobs that allow for that. And there will be some kids that will take on to technology. We take on kids primarily the silent middle. They're not the best in their class. And in many instances, the second they start playing around with the computers, they thrive. They love it while they weren't performing well in class because they don't learn the typical way a high school is taught. So providing different opportunities. This is not funneling everyone to become a plumber.
Right.
But it's providing lots of different opportunities. Not everyone is also meant to go to an Ivy League college.
Right. Yeah.
Therefore, don't push the entire high school population toward the IB program and advanced placement classes and everything else, which is what high schools are rated by.
Right.
Therefore, that's the incentive for the entire system to push all kids toward that end.
They should be rated by employability or how much revenue the people then they would have an incentive to make sure that the people are getting the right skills. I know when I was in high school, we had an automotive shop and a woodworking shop and a photography shop and a graphics design shop, and people went on and did those things in their careers.
Yeah.
We should have had a plumbing shop.
We were.
I was saying on my show, my plumber makes more money than I do.
We were meeting with folks from the Manufacturers Association, and they're having difficulty filling some positions, and they were saying that welders, there's class 1, class 2, class 3, and class 4 welders. Class 4 welders, now you have to be pretty good to get up there, make $250,000 a year.
I'm going to become a welder.
Right.
Absolutely. That's incredible. Now, there are some people that would have the opportunity and the skills and the desire. Why not give them a chance to do that? So in the school system, I think we are stuck with a traditional model, measuring only toward certain end results rather than looking at the community and the opportunities in the business world and matching the training and the education to that.
So James, if you snapped your fingers, what would the world look like?
Absolutely. I think it would be Europe as a viable option for the employers in terms of entry-level talent, in that we would be that for them rather than the corporate social responsibility piece, but again, meeting a market need where we'll provide you someone on your staff for 6 months that can get affiliated with your culture, understands how to do the work that's needed to be there, and saving you a lot of the overhead in terms of if you were to bring in someone new that you would have to train and onboard it and things of that nature. I also thinking about our model being a little bit more flexible, and what I mean by that is meeting the needs of our partners by creating let's say if Capital One has an influx in anti-money laundering, then that is what we particularly do, is partner with Capital One to create another site of Europe in the national capital region that specifically we just send students there, and that Capital One be willing to send some of their professionals to do the training for us. Again, an opportunity for them to, again, cutting the middleman out of the way, students that are going to be able to come in, do the job, be familiar with the culture, and bring that high level of soft skills. So if I waved my magic wand, that's what it would look like. In addition to clearly the funding and everyone listening, donating a lot to Genesys Works in Europe as well.
Awesome. Well, let me ask you, so how could people reach out to you if they want to get a hold of you, James?
Yes, absolutely. So I would definitely encourage you to take a look at our website at www.yearup.org. That's YEARUP.org. And I can be reached at jwilliamsii@yearup.org.
Cool. Awesome. And Mahan, how can folks reach out to you?
Same here. The website is always a good option. Genesys, GENSYS, works, WORKS.org. And my email address is mtavakoli, TAVAKOLI, at genesysworks.org. So I would love to engage with anyone that wants to have an additional conversation around this.
Awesome. And I'm going to encourage our listeners to go to both sites, take a look at Genesys, take a look at Europe, see how, if your company can engage, is either hiring these students or engaging in contributing money or holding fundraisers or in some way supporting this. Again, this is not just a moral imperative, but it is a business imperative to keep our economy growing. And with that, I'm going to close out our show. My name's Lorne Epstein. You've been listening to The Lorne Epstein Show here on 96.7 FM. We'll see you next Monday at 10 a.m.